Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Truth. I'm your host, the one you love the most, Niall Heston, back with a brand new episode here on The Truth. Back once again with my brother Lucas. Lucas, how are you doing here today?
Good. Even though Hawkeyes lost last night, I'm sure you were pretty disappointed to see that. But it's a good game in the start. But of course, we blew it. But we got the women's on tonight, quarterfinals, weekend coming up. Big game on Sunday for the Hawks. We win. I
So
think we
it's
win the tournament.
it's winning the Big Ten tournament, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I just was making sure it was for some reason not the NCAA tournament, but yeah, I watched the Hawkeye game. I had work, but I had watched the Hawkeye game a little bit later, so that's why when I texted you when I did, or you and Dad, I should say, that was when I had watched the game. So we were hanging around. I mean, we were winning, but I feel like we've done that many times this season, and we haven't been able to come up on top, which is disappointing. But yeah, so another Iowa loss, and I think I saw that it's win and get in versus Nebraska, and I think the loser's not in. So that was before the Michigan State game I had seen. So be curious to kind of see how that plays out down the line. We are going to be talking about fantasy baseball here today, continuing with our position rankings. Today, we're going to be focusing on the catcher position. If you missed the other two shows, the previous two shows in this series, we went over starting pitchers and relief pitchers. Speaking of fantasy baseball, you have been selected with the number one overall pick in our fantasy baseball league. What was that thought process like? You've already told me some of your initial reactions to picks 2 through 5 already being taken, but how does it feel to have the number one selection?
It's great. It's an honor. I don't really know. I was asking why, like, the keepers, just because I didn't know if there was, like, I'm assuming Bobby Witt wasn't a keeper option, but I don't know what is going on. Like, I don't know why. I understand, like, the first couple people picking 2, 3, but, like, there's no reason for me to pick 6. Like, I have my own destiny. I know there's an argument against the number one pick, but I'm not taking number 6. So,
Well, my thing too was I was talking to one of my buddies who's new to the league and who is going to be selecting in the 5 spot. I think there's no clear cut number one for fantasy, especially in roto leagues. Like I think there's four really good options, and I could be wrong with the four really good options that I'm thinking of, but the first obviously is Bobby Witt. I think that's definitely one. Otani as a hitter, Judge, and even J Ram, I think are the four big guys that I think really obviously injuries are going to play a role regardless, but I think if anyone drafted those four guys, it definitely would be a stud. And you can even potentially make the case for Ellie at 5 or 6, but there's just, you're looking for those big time money makers. So when you're sitting at number one, like you have that choice. And if you had to make that choice right now, who would you select?
probably Bobby Witt.
Yeah, I think he could win MVP. I mean, obviously he steals like a ton of bags, hits for a ton of power. He's like kind of like
Like a
the
J
all
Ram, you
around
said,
guy.
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it doesn't matter who you tell me who you're picking because you're the number one pick in the draft. But yeah, so that's where we're at with our fantasy leagues. I just thought I'd mention that. I spun the wheel to have people decide draft order this year, and I somehow managed to spin myself last. So I don't even get to pick my draft position, but it's whatever. The top 5 spots are taken up, and I think that's kind of what consensus looks like. But anyways, we're going to continue with that fantasy talk here today, as mentioned, by focusing on the catcher position. We're going to give you guys our top 10 catchers, which is kind of what we've done in the other two shows on this series, where we gave you guys our top 10 starting pitchers and relief pitchers. So I'm looking forward to actually saying it on time this time and saying the guys that we have here. So for Lucas's top 10, he has William Contreras from the Brewers at 1, Yanier Diaz from Houston at 2, Cal Raleigh from Seattle at 3, Will Smith from the Dodgers at 4, Adley Rutschman, Baltimore at 5, Salvador Perez, Kansas City 6, 7, Wilson Contreras from St. Louis, 8, JT Romuto from Philadelphia, 9, Shea Langiers from the Athletics, and then 10, Francisco Alvarez from the Mets. Myself, I have Adley Rutschman as 1, Will Smith as 2, William Contreras as 3, JT Romuto at 4, Sal Perez at 5, 6, Logan O'Hoppe, 7, Yanier Diaz, 8, Cal Raleigh, 9, Tyler Stevenson, and 10, Gabriel Moreno. So definitely some variety here in our catchers rankings, but I'm excited to talk about it. Lucas, I highlighted your number 2 guy. Why don't you go ahead and sell me on Yanier Diaz?
Yeah, number 2 for me is Yanier Diaz. Catching position is really interesting. I think there's a lot of really exciting young guys, and I think that's definitely a change in like the past 10 years because it really was kind of veteran-led. But Diaz had a really good year last year. Played in 148 games, which is pretty rare for a catcher, at least nowadays. I mean, only 14 other games. Of course, he could have been DH. And he also gives you eligibility. I know this isn't really the part of the show, but he gives you first base eligibility, which is nice. Hit 29 doubles last year, 16 home runs, 84 RBIs, 107 strikeouts to 24 walks. Two stolen bases, not really a factor, but he hit 299, 325 on base, 441 slug, 766 OPS. I mean, 299 as a catcher, you will take that in 150 games. And it's a little bit of a boost from last year. Last year, he kind of showed more power numbers, 22 doubles and 23 home runs, less RBIs, and kind of more strikeout to walk in terms of the ratio. But he had a better OPS, and that just kind of depends on what you're looking for. For me, I'm looking at a catcher who will get on base because I feel like I'd rather get someone who can get on base, who can kind of mix in the doubles and home runs there instead of kind of drafting based on doubles and home runs and kind of mix in the on base factor. This will be his third full major league season, and I think the Astros this year are going to kind of be really interesting. But just looking at the names out there, Diaz really struck my mind, and I think he's definitely, we talked about it last show, but definitely someone who's not really a household name yet, and I think he should be, especially with the production he's putting up and how many games he's playing in.
So for myself, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about my number one guy, and it's gonna be Adley Rutschman. I'm a huge Adley Rutschman guy. I think Adley Rutschman every year. I'm always trying to draft him. I know I drafted him last year, and I rode with him. It was a little bit of a disappointing year to say the least for Adley Rutschman, especially in the average category. He dropped from 277 to 250. Home runs and RBI stayed the same, just one less home run and one less RBI. Biggest thing with Adley Rutschman, I feel like with a lot of catchers, right, you're not going to get tons of stolen base value. So I'm not looking at Adley Rutschman to get stolen base value. I'm looking at a guy that's durable. I mean, the last two seasons, he's played 154 games and 148 games. I believe he played basically all the games when he got called up, 113 there in his rookie season. So for a catcher who, it seems like catchers in today's day and age always are seemingly to get injured, he's one of the guys that's stable. I know it doesn't matter. It matters to know be the show, but that switch hitting ability does impact his ability to obviously see different sides of pitching, see kind of better matchups typically, and he's proven to have success against these guys. So with that in mind, I also think this is a very young, talented lineup. This is a lineup that's going to score a lot of runs, and Adley Rutschman is going to be a big contributing factor to that. I've seen a lot of times, him and Gunnar Henderson are hitting 1-2. And usually, a lot of times, especially at that level, you want to put one of your best, if not your best player at that one spot, because there's a lot of times where he'll get that extra at bat, or at least in the top of the lineup, and Adley Rutschman is that guy. I'm expecting him to kind of bounce back. Not that it was necessarily too terrible of a year, but I think, looking at where he's at, batting 250 last year, 27 average decrease. I think that gets back up to at least a 260 range. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets, upwards of 24, 25 home runs and gets to RBIs up to 100. So I think there's a lot of potential there. Not that it means anything, but he's seen the ball really well in spring training, batting 462 with one home run and two RBIs and an OPS of 1.255. So a lot of things are signaling, in the right direction. I know at spring training, it's not the same, but I think when you look at the catcher position, I want to say the catcher position's weak in the fact that there's always a lot of movement. Like there's not like necessarily a clear-cut number one, clear-cut number two, like some of the other positions. I think Adley Rutschman fits the mold of effective catcher, and I definitely will be looking to draft him once again in my league. All right, the next guy I have highlighted on your list is right under number two at number three.
Yeah, number three, big dumper, Cal Raleigh. He's been around a while, which, I mean, doesn't surprise me, but you kind of seem to forget and just kind of shows how fast time goes. But he's the kind of opposite of Diaz. Raleigh's a guy that's going to get you a lot of bombs, going to get you a lot of power. I mean, he hit 34 home runs as a catcher last year, 30 in 2023, 27 in 2022. And I feel like that's kind of rare from the catcher position. And he's still kind of maintaining, like he's getting 100 RBIs. I could see like 34 bombs and 75 RBIs, but he's giving you 100 RBIs, 70 walks, 176 strikeouts. Again, 6 stolen bases isn't a factor. And the average is what's kind of the question mark. He hit 220 last year, 232 the year before, 211 the year before. But again, it just depends on what you want to draft. I have him number 3 behind Diaz because I mentioned it. I would rather draft someone who gets on base, and kind of the extra base hits will kind of come along with that. But if Kyle Riley fell to me and Diaz was gone, I would absolutely draft Kyle Riley because he's given me 35 home runs a year, or he did last year at least. There's a lot of upside there for a 750 OPS guy. Just really good numbers all around. And the Mariners are another team that's going to be interesting to watch in the AL West this year that I think is really up for grabs. He's going to compete. He's going to work hard. Kind of similar to Diaz, 153 games, Mariners aren't afraid to play him at DH and have him catch 4 to 5 times a week. So that's something you like to see. But again, with that comes durability. There hasn't been any issues in his career in terms of durability. So that's not something I would draft to avoid. But I just really like his power numbers. That's why he's number 3 for me, and some not on another list just because the average isn't going to get you there. But you know what you're going to get with him.
Yeah, for myself, I'm going to go with the number 6 spot on my rankings, and it's going to be Logan O'Hoppe. And currently, I think ADP relatively like the ninth, 10th best catcher. There's a lot of risk with O'Hoppe. I think also too, I feel like I'm always going for the younger catchers just because they're more durable, right? I mean, obviously, catching is probably the most enduring position that there is in baseball. Like people's legs, they gradually decline over time. Unless you're Sal Perez, it seems like he could go play 162 games behind the dish if he really wanted to, but looking at a guy like Logan O'Hoppe, I saw tremendous strides last season. The biggest thing with him is he's just on a terrible team. I mean, he's on the team like the Angels. He had 20 home runs last year and 56 RBIs. Like he has no runs out there to help, produce that. He also increased his average by 8 points to 244. He played 136 games last season. So I think he definitely took strides in the right direction. I mean, obviously, this Angels offense, and particularly the infield position, guys like him, Neto, Nolan Chanel, I can definitely did not say his name right at all. But a lot of young bats, right? And with a lot of young bats comes a lot of risk, but potentially a lot of rewards as well. And I think Logan O'Hoppe is a guy. I mean, he's clearly marked at the 10 spot, so you can definitely wait a little bit to get him. But I think he can definitely bring you those power numbers, especially when you're in roto leagues where I feel like you have to prioritize certain categories. I'm always trying to prioritize home runs. I think if I can get 20 home runs for my catcher, especially for where I'm getting Logan O'Hoppe at, that's huge because I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but as a 10th catcher, you're not getting him in the first or second round. So you could definitely wait a couple rounds, build your team around that, and then get a guy like Logan O'Hoppe. Now, is that to say he's going to get 20 home runs? No. I definitely think he's got the potential to do so, and it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how he's utilized in that Angels lineup. But if he can stay healthy, stay on the field, and kind of drive in some runs and boost his numbers even more. But I think this could be easily his best year yet. And for him to be ranked at 10, especially a lot of question marks, in my opinion, ahead of him, I think this is a perfect opportunity for him to kind of sell out and be a really contributing piece, and a piece that kind of is a sleeper going into the season. All right, what about your final catcher who we have position ranked at 10?
Yeah, I was kind of struggling to decide who the last guy would be in the catching position because no one really jumped off the page this far down. But I picked Francisco Alvarez. Was a top prospect in the minor leagues. He's only 23 years old, but he's been around for 2 full seasons in New York and Flushing. Numbers, again, don't really pop off the page, but he's going to give you solid production. Only 100 games last year, which is, again, only, but still. He had a little bit of an injury issue, but nothing that's really seeming to carry over into this year, which is always good. 14 doubles, 11 bombs, 47 RBIs, 86 walks to 30 strikeouts. Again, 1 steal, doesn't matter. Hit 237, 307 on base, 710 OPS. He was definitely better the year before in terms of power numbers, but he did play in 23 more games. He had 25 bombs and 63 RBIs. But the Mets this year, obviously, everybody knows Juan Soto is a Met. It's going to be a really exciting team, and Alvarez is someone who was highly touted in the minors for a reason. Like, he was a really good hitter in the minors. I'm not sure in terms of where he peaked in the minors, but, I mean, he played 270 career games and 61 career home runs, 181 RBIs. Like, he was in the minors, and he raked in the minors. And the catching position is just so questionable. You kind of mentioned it, the movement there. I just like what I see out of Francisco Alvarez. Honestly, like, no part of his game is like amazing to me. Like, I'm going to really target him. But again, the end of the list was kind of hard to compile. But I just like Alvarez, his age, his youth, his potential is what really excites me.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned about this catcher position, particularly at the 10 spot. I felt like it was pretty hard from like really 7, 8, 9, 10, even onwards to kind of find solidified guys. As I mentioned, it's kind of a position where like I feel like it's scarce in the fact that like, yeah, it's one catcher position, right? There's typically not like a lot of different eligibilities. Like it's not like one of those guys that you can put at second, first, shortstop, outfield. I mean, sometimes they have some secondary holdings, but the catcher is kind of a unique position. So I kind of felt the same way as far as where to rank out, my number 10 spot, who I'm going to talk about as well. But I thought I would take some risk here. And a guy that a lot of people are really hyped about going into this year is Gabriel Moreno from the Diamondbacks. Now, Me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of him. I think he definitely has potential, but I'm more of a guy that I like to see it a year or two before I really kind of start to buy the hype, because I think some people look at a prospect or look at a younger player and say, hey, this guy's going to be great. And a lot of times it doesn't pan out. And then you kind of look stupid when you're sitting at the bottom of the standings in your fantasy leagues. But I think Gabe Moreno can definitely be a guy that is a contributing factor. And one of the main reasons why is the team that he's on, the Diamondbacks. This is a good lineup. And I think this is kind of a sleeper lineup as well. And Gabriel Moreno is definitely one of those guys that can fill the pieces. A good average guy as far as catcher position is concerned. He did drop a little bit in average from 284 to 266. Hasn't really shown tremendous power, even though I saw it a little bit in the minor leagues, but 7 and 5 home runs, 50 and 45 RBIs, and about 200 games playing with the Diamondbacks in 2 seasons, or the last 2 seasons, I should say. So again, there's a lot of risk with that. I think either, he has the potential to jump up to 13, 14 home runs, 60, 70 RBIs, get that average back up to 284. Not a guy I'm super high about, but guy I definitely wanted to touch on, especially since a lot of people are kind of starting to become higher and higher on him. He is still ranked 14th among most catchers, but I think he's ahead some of the other guys that have kind of established themselves and getting a little older in their careers, like Keibert Ruiz, Ryan Jeffers, or Sean Murphy. So it is a risk for sure, but I think more than anything, if I were to draft Gabe Moreno, it would be later, and it would be hopefully as a backup, but that could turn into a star catcher, and then I could trade my Adley Rutschman, my Cal Ray, like one of those catchers. But a lot of risk, but a lot of reward coming from Gabriel Moreno in Arizona. Well, thank you guys for listening to another episode here on The Truth. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure you follow The Truth on Twitter at The Truth as want to stay up to date with the latest information regarding The Truth, including podcast dates, podcast uploads, and other important information you don't want to miss. Make sure you guys also follow The Truth on Instagram and TikTok at the.tt.truth. Are you looking to find a drink that offers peak hydration, raises your energy levels, speeds up your recovery, and keeps your mind sharp through focused memory? Look no further than Acid Rainwater. I'm excited to partner with Blended Sports AZ and Acid Rainwater, which focuses on peak hydration and productivity, will also maintain the ecosystem-friendly product. Use code HESSON15, that's HESSON15 for 15% off every purchase. As always, I'm your host, the one you love the most, Niall Hesson, joined once again by my brother Lucas. Take care and good night.